Well, just after 7:15, hope you're good this Monday morning. We need to keep our eyes on the energy crisis in our country. It's grown beyond a nuisance to an economic disaster, of course. Stage 6 just this past weekend. Thankfully, I can report this morning Stage 2 in place at the moment. Stage 4 from 4 o'clock this afternoon. So no Stage 6, at least for today. But as we all know, Eskom can tell us at the last moment if things change. All right, there we are live this morning at Goldfields, South Deep, out in Western area. Now with the sun rising, you get a real sense of how big that is. So those solar panels there are busy powering, or not all of it, but some of that entire structure there to the left-hand side, producing gold, of course, so important for our economy. So yes, we're scaling up, but now we're going to scale down. Scaled up, of course, at the mines. But what about independent power? What about how that is being used? What are the tricky and sticking points? Well, Brian Day is the chair of the SA Independent Power Producers Association. You might know the acronym IPPs. In this case, Brian is very much at the centre of all of this. He's made time to come in and join me this morning. Brian, morning. I
Good morning.
Appreciate the time as well. So just help me understand. It's part of our viewer question this morning. Can IPPs put power back onto the grid for Eskom? I'm getting mixed messages.
So there's a couple of ways that it can happen, and government's taken some dramatic steps over the last 2.5 years or so to make it more possible for bigger plants. First of all, about 13 years ago, government launched the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. We call it REAP. World-class program, and under that program we've had about 6.3 gigawatts of renewable energy installed. That is ongoing, and more of those rounds. In fact, we're expecting in the next month or two bid window 7 to be launched by government, and that will then expand. And those the new rounds are even bigger because the need is that much larger. What's also happened in the last 2 years or so, though, is there's the opportunity for independent power producers to build these facilities for private offtake. So you still have a power purchase agreement, which is your long-term market agreement, and instead of that being with Eskom under the REAP, it's with one of the big entities. Interestingly, Goldfields chose to do it slightly differently. I think that's about a 50 megawatt plant. They chose to do the investment themselves, and that's one of the options. If you want to spend your own capital and invest that sort of money and essentially become your own power producer, that's one of the options. Another option, of course, is you get a third party to do it. You don't have that capital on your own balance sheet. You get somebody else to fund it with both equity and debt on their side, and then you power the electricity. You pay for the actual electricity that comes through.
Yeah, because they were saying to me when I was there last week, and they're going to, I'm sure, talk about this with Pule, where we are this morning. There you are in Western area, that they want us to try and last the life of the mine, which is the next 80 years. Obviously, they'll have to do maintenance, etc., but over an 80-year period, it makes financial sense for them. But they're a massive power producer, a massive power user as well. From an independent power producer's side, how big is the market? How many people are able to get into it? Because the price point is still, I would contend, one of the bigger issues. It's still very expensive to get into.
Well, it's a lot to do the development work, etc. So that's an investment, but that's business. You know, you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to take the appropriate risks. But the opportunity is enormous. I mentioned a number just now of 6.3 gigawatts that's been built under the REAP over the last sort of 12 years since it got started. There are, of course, others who've done their own power, from members of the public who've put it on their own rooftops. Places like Mall of Africa have got a 4.5 or 5 megawatt system on their roof. So big shopping centres, big car parks, big warehouses, etc. So there's probably 8, 9, 10 gigawatts installed across the country. The reality is, though, that with Eskom's aging coal fleet, they are due to be decommissioned, not because of climate change, not for any other reason than they're just old. They were built in the sort of 1950s and 60s, and they've reached the end of their life. So between now and 2030, around 11 gigawatts of coal-fired power has to be decommissioned. Now, you've got to build to replace that and link up the shortfall. And of course, with renewables, you need to build more capacity because the energy output per unit of capacity is lower. The sun doesn't shine 24/7, the wind doesn't blow. So you're talking about 35, 40, 45% capacity factor. So you've got to build something like 50 gigawatts of renewables between now and 2030.
I'm afraid I only got a BA degree. That's why I became a journalist, and it sounds impressive, but can you just work that out for me? So if you're saying Mall of Africa, 5 megawatts, I know this is a 50 megawatt plant we're looking at here in Goldfields. Let's work with Goldfields because now we've got a visual representation there. How many Goldfields does it take to get to that number you're talking about?
Well, you've got to get 20 Goldfields to get to 1 gigawatt.
Wow. And you have to multiply that.
So you've got to multiply that by 50. If it's all solar.
Sure.
Some of it will be wind, and that's actually one of the real advantages of having the two different technologies. Mm-hmm. Wind blows at different times of the day, typically in certain areas more afternoon than midday. And so in some areas you get a really good overlay of your generation profiles between your solar and your wind. But of course, you still need the grid expansion, you still need storage, you still need backup, whether that's gas or something else. So there's a whole system that has to be developed. So Eskom got their transmission development plan, and their number is 53 gigawatts. The Energy Council talks about between 50 and, the Presidential Climate Commission talks about between 50 and 60 gigawatts. But you need both the new generation capacity and you need the grid and everything that goes with it. But it's also an opportunity for the country because that means you've got economic expansion, you've got investment. You wanted much of that to be local investment, but we've got the opportunity and the challenge to train, to retrain, to get the local manufacturing value chains going so that you're not just doing the projects, but that you're actually developing the broader economy, especially in areas like the sort of southwest corner of Mpumalanga, where you've got a lot of those coal-fired power stations and the associated mines and secondary industries that are then coming to the end of their life. So there's a massive challenge and opportunity to do the necessary things and have enough of the new generation in similar areas so that you can keep those economies going.
Keep them going as well, but also future-proof them as well, because we don't want this to be a reactive situation. When they go offline, then start jumping, and that planning starts now. Brian, thank you very much for coming in to join us, making a lot of sense. A lot of big numbers. Thankfully, Brian's here to explain it to me. I get lost between the megawatts and gigawatts and kilowatt hours. It's always good fun for me to try and do maths. Luckily, Brian Day is the chairman of the SA Independent Power Producers Association, much smarter than I am and very kind to make time this morning.